reached out to him to talk about nuclear issues. So that kind of sums up both the seriousness of the situation and a possible path forward, judging by US President Donald Trump's comments.
Honor, how would it likely to play out internationally? Again, we look at the oil markets, which are huge in Iran. If there's some kind of regime change, which, as you say, it's the first time that I hear rumors or murmurs about it in the region in a very long time.
Yeah, I think the impact on oil markets, yes, it was significant, but it's somewhat limited as well, because obviously there's still an oil glut in the market, supply glut in the market, but the international reaction to a possible US military operation is somewhat trickier to navigate at this point. On the one hand, you have a bunch of countries surrounding Iran, including some that we could describe as its arch rivals or historic rivals, and even they would be wary of a sudden destabilization of the government, especially if they don't know what comes next, and it is far from being clear at the moment, except maybe for Israel, which has its own very fundamental existential differences with Iran. On the other hand, though, there's a question of how the Iranian people react to a possible military intervention. We have seen back in June, when there was a war between Iran and Israel, that the Israeli and American military involvement there did have an impact on the Iranian population, which rallied around the flag, so to speak, when there was clearly a foreign intervention, which is probably part of the reason why so far, especially Israeli authorities, have been refraining from talking publicly about getting involved in the Iranian protest movement. But at the same time, there is clear public widespread discontent with their current rulers. So it's very far from being clear how exactly the Iranian population would react to such a military operation.
Honor, thank you so much. Honor Anser, Bloomberg's managing editor for the Middle East and North Africa. Now let's continue the discussion on geopolitics with Rachel Elahus, Director General at RUSI. Rachel was previously at NATO as the U.S. Secretary of Defense representative in Europe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I mean, the previous guest said, may we live in interesting times. We certainly have that at the moment. I don't know whether you see actually the possibility of the Islamic Republic being overthrown. I mean, this would be a seminal event that would transform geopolitics and energy markets.
It absolutely would. I mean, we've seen cycles of unrest in Iran since 2009. I think what's different this time is that there are broad segments of society involved in these protests, and it's a combination of those internal tensions as well as external factors in the region driving these protests. So I think it's certainly a possibility, probably not particularly helpful for the U.S. to be threatening strikes that could possibly offer the regime a scapegoat factor there, saying that these were driven by external factors rather than the internal tensions in Iran.
Is there a danger that actually, the Trump administration does something to get access to oil? Like, what do we understand the foreign policy of the U.S. being right now?
Well, I think if you look at Ukraine, Venezuela, the pressure on Denmark and Greenland, certainly the common theme there is the grab for strategic resources by the U.S. administration. So there is definitely that risk that the Iranian regime could play this in a way that suggests that the U.S. isn't interested in democracy or regime change or the welfare of the region, but just a grab for their strategic resources.
I mean, what would be the consequences of a strike in Iran?
Well, the threat of a strike in and of itself can create some pressure on the regime and possibly restrain some of their worst instincts in terms of cracking down on the protesters. But I think, as your previous guest said, there could be knock-on effects in the region, not just for Iran, but Iraq, Israel. I think you'd see everybody getting involved if this isn't contained.
Rachel, the fact that the U.S. action in Venezuela was so swift and actually taking head of state from a sovereign country and bring him to the U.S., does that set a precedence really for around the world? Are countries now trying to organize themselves to make sure that doesn't happen to them?
Well, it's really mixed. I think initially people were quite optimistic that removing Maduro, who was not democratically elected in Venezuela, would bring new hope for democracy in Venezuela. But I think what we've seen since is that intervention alone is not going to create stability in Venezuela or anywhere else. So the hard work in terms of reestablishing the power of central government institutions, taking away the power from criminal organizations that have typically been entrenched and intertwined with state institutions, that's something that's going to take time to rebuild. So countries around the world could see a precedent where the U.S. goes in, creates some sort of early peace deal or intervention, but then really doesn't take it further and do the hard work to create that stability and prosperity.
But if you're Russia, if you're Vladimir Putin, does this embolden you because you think you can do the same with Ukraine, or are you scared that the U.S. does the same to you?
In terms of Russia, I've actually been surprised at the muted response from Russia. They were an ally of Venezuela. They are an ally of Iran. They were an ally of Syria. If we look back a year ago, certainly they really haven't done much to come to the rescue of their so-called friends and partners. So I don't think Russia has anything to fear in terms of the U.S. getting involved in its near abroad, with the exception of Ukraine, where we do continue to see a lot of engagement from the U.S. administration in trying to work with the Europeans to come to some sort of a peace settlement.
What do you think happens in Venezuela from now? I mean, again, there's been a lot of talk about, there's now a threat against Exxon, who said, look, if I get in, it's going to be quite difficult to make it work. So is it going to be much more unstable than we even imagined?
Well, it's positive that what's left of the government is making the right noises in terms of trying to cooperate internationally and create some sense of stability. I think it also matters how Colombia, Cuba, and other regional partners are handled by the U.S. administration. If we can focus on Venezuela and getting things right there and creating a climate for investment and some sense of future prosperity for the people of Venezuela. I mean, when Maduro came in, they lost nearly a third of their wealth. And so I think there is a bright light out there if we can just focus the Trump administration on the hard work after the intervention.
What happens with China?
Well, I'm sure China is watching its interests in Venezuela very closely. A lot of economic interests, a lot of long-term investments. So I think they won't go, although they're being quiet now, I think you will see Chinese influence come up as we try to make deals on the ground and move forward with extracting that oil from Venezuela.
Richard, if you look at 2026, how unsettling do you think it will be in terms of foreign policy? I know you're going to be busy, but how do we end up at the end of the year?
Certainly a good market for think tanks, even if not a positive one. This is a continued year of disruption. And I think if we look at U.S. foreign policy writ large, we can see that the U.S. that we knew for many decades, that acted not just in its own self-interest, but for the collective good, and often subsumed its own interests for the collective good, that United States is gone. And we're seeing much more unilateral behavior, much more mercantilist foreign policy. We're even seeing the U.S. in some cases act above the law, both U.S. law and international law, and imposing its own will on other countries. So I think we'll see a continuation of that, the assertion of U.S. interests unilaterally rather than in the collective good. And I think around the world we'll continue to see the erosion of international rules and norms that have constrained the worst behaviors in foreign policy and interventionism over the last few decades. And what you're seeing in Iran, what you're seeing on the African continent, is a reflection of that instability and that disruption, for good and for bad.
Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. Rachel Alahos there, Director General of RUSI. Coming up, Friedrich Merz says the geopolitical uncertainty is reason to strike up closer ties with India as the German Chancellor makes his first trip to Asia. We'll be live in New Delhi next, and this is Bloomberg.
Have you ever thought about, or would you make a movie for a streaming service? Would you make a Netflix movie?
Man, that's a great question. I mean,
I'm waiting for one where I ask and you go, that was a shitty question.
yeah. I mean, you know, you good at your job, bro. Like, it's just actually the first time anybody's ever asked me that. You know, I'm not here to say what I would and wouldn't do in the future. You know, but the theatrical experience is one that means a great deal to me. It means a great deal to us. I feel a certain responsibility. Like if Fruitvale had happened a calendar year later, it probably would have come out on streaming. You know, I've been fortunate enough that everything that I've written and directed has been a theatrical release. So I feel a duty to try to protect that. You know, but that's where I'm at today.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
Middle East and Africa. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. Join me on Horizons Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insights from this exciting region. Now weekdays, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute political news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Tyler Kendall in Washington, and this is Bloomberg.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Pulse. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London, and these are your top stories. Fed Chair Jay Powell vows to stand firm as the Trump administration threatens criminal charges in a dramatic escalation of tensions. President Trump says the U.S. is considering some very strong options in response to the deadly crackdown in Iran. Security forces there say they've regained control across the country. Plus, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is set to sign deals on tech, defense, and critical minerals during his first visit to India. Now let's get more on that story. And Friedrich Merz says the world should brace for more uncertainty with the return of global power politics and is urging closer economic ties and security ties with countries like India. He made the comments alongside the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his first trip to Asia since taking power last May. Let's bring in Nazreen Syria, Bloomberg's managing editor for South Asia, and our Oliver Cook, our chief Europe correspondent. So thank you both for joining us. Nazreen, what's been agreed between the two leaders?
Well, we've seen today 10 agreements being signed, spanning a range of sectors from critical minerals to defense. The two countries have pledged stronger economic and security ties. We've also seen talk on and ongoing negotiations regarding the European Union and India's free trade agreement. Both sides have pledged to speed that up, and we're looking at possibly a deal later this month. That has been key. I think for both Germany and for India, it's important, given the geopolitical changes that we are seeing, to forge these, to showcase these stronger ties. We've heard Merz talk about growing power politics in the world and the need for these two countries to forge these closer ties. I think Germany sees India as a strong partner. India is the most populous country in the world. It also is the fastest growing major economy in the world, and Germany sees India as a key economic partner. So a lot of business deals, a lot of security ties on the table in these talks.
And Ollie, Merz has been under pressure at home and is also struggling to reduce Germany's dependence on China, for example, for raw materials. So how important is this visit for the Chancellor?
Yeah, not just on China, but also the United States now is sort of unreliable partner for Germany and much of the world, certainly on issues of trade and potentially on issues of defense. And for Friedrich Merz, in his first trip to Asia there in India, talking really about expanding defense ties with India, but also economic ties. We'll give you an example of one of the main deals that we've been watching, that we've had reporting on, an $8 billion submarine deal that the Indians might be buying from Germany in a sort of joint venture by ThyssenKrupp Marine, in one of the biggest orders that the Indian government has ever put forward. And this really highlights a couple of things for Germany. Germany is trying to find new export markets now that, the Chinese economy has really grown substantially and is potentially tapped out, trying to maybe push some of the Western industry out, is trying to find new markets of growth. For example, when you look at Germany and China, they do about $200 billion worth of trade every year. If you look at India and Germany, it's about $30 billion. So there's a lot of scope for growing that over the next couple of years, and that is going to be a big focus for the Chancellor of Germany, is trying to find new export markets. And particularly why India is so attractive is it's a nation that is also industrializing at a fast rate. For a lot of these companies in Germany and across Europe, they build a lot of the machinery that goes into some of these factories. So it's a huge opportunity there as far as the Germans are concerned for an economy that, as you know, Francine, we've been talking about for years now, has really stalled out.
Nazreen, how does this visit actually play into India's relationship with the US and Russia?
So with the US, this, I think Prime Minister Modi, what he's been trying to do is to build these partnerships with other countries in order to offset the sort of weakening relationship that we've seen between the US and India. The US has slapped 50% tariffs on India. We've seen India's exports to the US really take a hit. The US is India's biggest trade export market, and so we are seeing India trying to develop these other trade agreements with countries to diversify its export basket. The European Union is key to that. As mentioned, they are discussing finalizing this free trade agreement that will really unlock investment and trade for both countries. Aside from that, we are seeing the security relationship also improve. As Ali mentioned, the submarine deal that we wrote about last week, this will be key. It's not just the manufacturing of the submarines, but it's the technology transfer that will take place in this deal. It will be the first of its kind, and it will be a real game changer for the relationship there. On Russia, it's a little bit more complicated, and India does have long-standing historical ties, political and economic ties with Russia, and we're not going to see that changing anytime soon. But I think what Germany is trying to do is making the argument to India that we can provide the defense equipment to you. You can slowly reduce your reliance and your dependence on Russia in that way.
Ali, Merz is also pushing on behalf of the EU for a free trade deal with India. Is it any closer?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he made a few comments, a couple of minutes ago, saying that urgently they need to conclude that free trade agreement between India and the European Union. A little bit of history on that. That is a negotiation that began back in 2007 and died in 2014, has been revived in 2022, and was really supposed to be inked at the end of last year, and now has been pushed into potentially being signed this month. So that potentially will happen as a signing ceremony in India on January 26th, when Ursula von der Leyen is going to go over there. And again, it speaks to what the Europeans are trying to do, build out the free trade apparatus. Now that the United States is unreliable, we now have the Mercosur deal with Latin America that's crossed over the line, that will likely be signed by the European Union, and India is another fertile market for them, a massive economy that is growing at a very rapid pace with a huge market.
Thank you both for joining us. Bloomberg's Chief Europe Correspondent Oliver Crook and our Managing Editor for Southeast Asia, Nazreen Syria. Now, the European Union and Mercosur have finally agreed a trade deal after negotiations that began 25 years ago. The deal with the South American bloc of Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay will create a free trade area large enough to rival the North American arrangement known as UMSCA. It will gradually erase tariffs on agricultural goods and other products. And Bloomberg understands that the UK and Germany are leading a European push to discuss plans to increase a military presence in Greenland to show President Donald Trump the continent is serious about Arctic security. Speaking aboard Air Force One, President Trump insisted one way or another the U.S. would get Greenland.
If we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will take Greenland, and I am not going to let that happen. Sure, I'd love to make a deal with them. It's easier. But one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland.
Well, let's bring in Sanne Wass, Bloomberg's Copenhagen reporter. Sanne, what's the mood in Denmark, and are there concerns about what a bigger military presence in the region might look like?
Yeah, the biggest concern for Denmark and for Greenland right now, that is Trump and whether he might move to take Greenland by force. So any move by European allies that could potentially de-escalate this situation would be it's very welcome news here in Denmark. Denmark has said it's open to allowing more US military presence in Greenland, and now the UK and Germany, they're pitching this joint NATO Arctic mission in the territory. Now, officials here in Denmark haven't specifically commented on these plans, but they have long pushed for NATO to take on a more active role in defending Greenland and in part to reassure Trump that defense there is taken care of. So no doubt that this will be welcome news in Denmark, even if some military experts say a mission that doesn't necessarily make sense.
Sanne, what is the likelihood of officials tempering President Trump's interest in Greenland when they travel to Washington this week?
Yeah, the Danish foreign minister and Greenlandic foreign minister, they will meet with Marco Rubio. We hear reports now that it will happen on Wednesday. There is a worry among some Danish lawmakers that this meeting could actually just make things worse. I mean, Danish and Greenlandic officials are arriving, really banking on this meeting to be the start of a diplomatic solution to this spat, and they're hoping to clarify things and essentially dismantle Trump's argument for why he needs control of Greenland. The problem is if Danish officials arrive with rational arguments and logic, because that won't necessarily work on Trump. I mean, just last night, Trump said it's not enough to lease Greenland. It's not enough to have it short term. He wants to own it. Denmark and Greenland has drawn a clear red line on that. So there is a risk that this meeting will just end in an impasse and a worry of what then might happen next.
Sanne, thanks so much. Sanne Wass, they're Bloomberg's Copenhagen reporter. Now let's return to our top story. And Fed independence is in focus after the Trump administration threatened criminal charges against the central bank over the renovations of its headquarters. Let's bring in Bloomberg MLive strategist Ven Ram. Ven, good morning. So the sentiment this morning seems to be sell America, but it's also not huge.
Morning, Francine. Yes, absolutely. The theme is unmistakable. I think that, we are seeing a pronounced kind of reaction in the long end of the Treasury curve with the 30-year yield approaching 5%, although we are kind of not exactly close, but we are getting there. And I think that if this risk aversion continues, we'll get there at some point in the next few weeks. The question, though, is what this means for other assets, US assets. And I think that the US dollar is also on the back foot this morning. I think the risk premium on the US dollar is pretty palpable now. At the moment, it's about 3% on my model values. And I think that, that risk premium has the potential to widen because, next week or probably the week after that, coinciding with Davos, Francine, we will have the White House nominate the next Fed chair. And if that chair happens to be very dovish, overtly dovish in the face of inflation data that we are bound to get this week that may show sticky inflation, then what does that mean for monetary policy, credible monetary policy in the US? It's not very credible to keep cutting rates when inflation is already above target. So all that is going to revive the scepter of sell America trade. That means a weaker dollar and higher treasury yields.
What impact, then, could this have on the dollar's role in the world?
Well, I think that, the dollar is not going away in any hurry. I think that, the dollar is still the predominant trading currency in the world. It is embedded into the plumbing of the world's financial system. So the dollar is not going to go out of fashion, but that is not to say that it's not going to decline further. I think that, it has had 2 quarters of successive gains, but this quarter looks particularly challenging because investors are likely to bring back the hedges that they had put on, say, in the first and second quarters of last year. I think they are going to revive those hedges because, with so much of policy uncertainty and geopolitical uncertainty opening up in the world with reference to Iran, I think that, people are going to put on those risk hedges, revive those risk hedges, which is going to be negative for the dollar in the short term.
Gold spiking further. Is 5,000 in sight then?
Well, it certainly seems that way. I mean, you've got a confluence of factors working in favor of gold. First of all, the dollar risk premium is positive for gold. You've got geopolitical tensions in Iran, which is again positive for gold. And if you have the sell America trade, that calls into question the value of fiat currencies. Non-fiat currencies, which is gold, will do very well. So it looks like the next 10% upside for gold is very much on the cards. But of course, when the market positioning is so overwhelmingly positive for gold, you've got to think and ask the question, what could go wrong? So investors would do well to look for some downside protection, because volatility can't be too far away when you have this crowded positioning in favor of gold.
Ven, as always, thank you so much for all of your commentary. Bloomberg M-Line strategist Ven Ram. Coming up, we'll look at the impact of protests in Iran and developments in Venezuela with, of course, oil market expert Nadia Martin-Wiggin from Svelland Capital. That's next, and this is Bloomberg.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
Why is it that NFTs have not recovered in the same way that, say, Bitcoin has?
Bloomberg is covering all things crypto.
It's a pretty spectacular story.
The people.
This is the future. This is the 21st
Okay.
century economy.
The transactions.
It snapped up nearly $1 billion of Bitcoin.
And the technology.
We need to build a digital Fort Knox.
That gives people financial freedom, and that's a wonderful thing.
That's extraordinary.
We ride the wave that is Bitcoin.
Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays only on Bloomberg.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets?
We'll see money stays across European equity markets.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
Africa, a region rife with potential for growth and opportunities, but not without its challenges. Bloomberg highlights the biggest stories, interviewing key players, and reporting on the issues impacting the region. Join us as we get to the heart of African business, politics, and economics, and ask the question, what's next? I'm Jennifer Zabasaja, and this is Next Africa. New episodes every month, only on Bloomberg.
The conversations that matter, the insights you need. This is The Pulse, and I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, President Trump says the U.S. is looking at potential options in response to violent crackdowns in Iran, which analysts say has seen 544 people killed and more than 10,000 imprisoned. Those figures could not be independently verified by Bloomberg. Now, the potential for regime change in Tehran could have a seismic impact on security in the region and global energy markets. So let's discuss all of this with Nadia Martin-Wiggin, director of Svelland Capital, a hedge fund that focuses on commodities and freight markets. And in a second, we'll also have our great reporter on individual companies. So Nadia, give us a sense, first of all, of where you see the price of oil going. Is there a danger that it gets very volatile, as Iran is also a huge supplier, and we're now for the first time in recent memory talking about potential regime change?
Absolutely. The market has really been in a selling pattern for the last few months. And so the market is definitely balanced towards the short side. And now we have geopolitics really taking center stage, led by Iran, questions about Venezuela, and finally Russian production and exports as well.
What happens, Nadia, if you go to Venezuela? What do you think will happen in Venezuela in terms of actual oil production?
Well, right now what we see is that we've been having this blockade. We've had exports of Venezuelan oil drop to 300,000 barrels per day from around 700,000, 800,000 barrels per day. We now are hearing from the Trump administration those exports will resume. In the near term, we really need big investments in Venezuela to make any kind of difference in the medium term in terms of production. But right now, what we're looking at is that China may be unable, and they've been buying 45% of Venezuelan oil, to continue to secure that oil at huge discounts. Because if the US government is acting as a go-between, they're going to want the market price. Or those will just be imported into the US, those barrels, and therefore China needs to source non-sanctioned barrels to replace that Venezuelan crude when Iranian and Russian barrels aren't that easy to deliver.
But Nadia, give us a sense, Iran is 4 or 5 times more important in terms of the millions of barrels that it has on the market. I think at some point it was also producing 6 million. Like, how important is Iran right now to global energy markets? And what are the chances that the Strait of Hormuz would actually be closed?
Yeah, so the production exports out of Iran, we saw a peak at around 2.15 million barrels per day worth of exports out of Iran last year, but it has dropped down to, sub 1 million barrels per day for periods of time. Right now, the biggest question is if Karg Island were to be attacked, because that's 28.5 million barrels per day, million barrels of storage. Right there, that it would really be a shock to the system if, let's say, something happened there and exports couldn't happen. The market is hugely unprepared for a closing of the Strait of Hormuz, the shipping markets, so forth. The cost of insurances in an already very strong shipping market, it would actually be quite catastrophic given the positioning in the oil market right now.
But is that possibility at 5% now, or has it just gone higher because of the big protests and the fact that also the US is talking about a possible strike, which we don't really know whether to take them at their word or not?
Well, it is an increased percentage, but of course the US government would not want these Straits of Hormuz to be shut, right? It's a #1 naval exercise by the US to protect those. But of course it is a possibility. Again, would Iran really want to do that? It would very much irritate its neighbors. So it depends what the rest of the neighboring countries want. There is also a big concern if things were to change in Iran, what would happen afterwards? Would there be a power vacuum? So I think the scenario we're really looking at is reduced outflows of Iranian oil and possible temporary halts, but not a real closing of the Straits of Hormuz.
Okay, Nadia, stay with us because President Trump, meanwhile, has criticized oil giant Exxon over its response to his push to extract oil from Venezuela. On Friday, the chief executive, Darren Woods, called Venezuela uninvestable during a meeting with the president and oil industry executives at the White House. Well, Trump fired back late on Sunday.
No, I didn't like Exxon's response. We have so many that want it. I'd probably be inclined to keep Exxon out. I didn't like their response. They're playing too cute.
Let's bring in Mitchell Furman, Bloomberg's oil reporter. Mitch, bring us up to date. Good morning, first of all, but bring us up to date with developments and why Exxon is, I don't know whether it's playing it safe or they are just not that interested in Venezuela.
Yeah, good morning. We heard from major oil executives at the White House on Friday where, we heard optimism, we heard caution, as President Trump looks to get a deal with them done to reinvigorate Venezuela's oil industry. ExxonMobil is the largest U.S. oil company, and they did call it uninvestable because of the current commercial and legal frameworks in place in Venezuela. Those need to change in order for it to become investable, he said. And, these companies think in decades. They need stable regimes in order to make long-term major investments. $100 billion is a lot. I mean, Exxon as a company spends less than $30 billion a year Chevron, ConocoPhillips, these companies need a path to clear returns, and even Harold Hamm, who was a major donor of President Trump and is a shale, U.S. shale tycoon, he said this excites him as an explorationist, but at the same time there is a lot of work that needs to be done for him to get involved.
I mean, Mitch, the problem is that you want to please the president because you don't want retaliation, but at the same time, if it doesn't make commercial sense, you may want to speak up. So what are Chevron and other Western oil companies saying?
Yeah, Chevron already produces in the country, as we know. They're the only U.S. company there, and they produce more than 200,000 barrels a day, and they say they can raise their production by 50% in the next 18 to 24 months. Longer term remains to be seen how much investment they're willing to make. They take a similar approach as Exxon and other competitors, that they do need that stability to invest long term. But we also heard excitement from the likes of Repsol, Spain's oil company, the oil field services companies such as Halliburton and SLB. They're excited. Some private folks such as Armstrong. So there is excitement, but there's also the caution of, if we're going to be putting big dollars in place, we need secure paths to return and safety for our people.
Yeah, and again, I guess the concern is you don't know politically what happens. Mitch, thank you, Mitchell Furman there, Bloomberg's oil reporter. So let's go back to Nadia Martin-Wiggin. Nadia, this is what we were saying, that actually we don't really know what happens in Venezuela. We don't 100% know what kind of political stability we have. Do you expect what needs to happen to have security in the energy space in Venezuela? It's infrastructure, it's investment. I mean, do you have any idea what terms could be palatable for some of these companies?
Well, number one is security, so safety of workers and so forth. Number two is that there's some longevity of a plan in place. So I think that's part of it. But I think also what the oil companies want is for maybe the Trump administration to push things, because currently PDVSA, they have to own 50% of the resources. They have to be the operators. And the companies, the foreign companies, would love to have more control of that. So I think that is part of the focus. So it's not necessarily a no. It is looking at what are the potential guarantees they can have there. At the same time, we have to remember that E&P companies have hugely outperformed the oil market last year. They were up. Exxon was up. The oil price was down. And what they have is a lot of pressure to continue paying dividends, because after COVID, when they cut dividends, people and investors left this space. So they have to watch their CapEx and their returns. And that is where they are very worried about investing a lot of money. Of course, the oil field service companies, well, they're on a contract, right? So they can leave. They're not taking the big risk. So that's why Schlumberger and so forth would be more positive.
Nadia, we only have a minute and a half left, but I guess the biggest question is, you have China stockpiling, you have also Mark Harding traveling, I believe, to China to try and sell exports to China directly. How different do you think the energy supply chains or the oil complex will be by the end of the year?
Oh, that absolutely. Different trade flows are something we should expect. And that is what we've seen, with all sorts of war conflicts and going forward. Right now, we have the U.S. Congress voting on 500% tariffs, possibly on rebuying Russian crude. India is stepping away from Russian crude. They were buying tenders into year-end. Reliance hasn't bought a single Russian barrel so far this year. So that trade flow could be really shifted. Canada is focused on Asia. We have OPEC increasing supply and now pausing. And this is where the demand picture will really come forward. So where we've had this two-tier market between sanctioned crude and unsanctioned crude, we might be in a much more normalized market.
Nadia, thank you so much for joining us. Nadia Martin-Wiggin, their director of Svetland Capital. Up next, Bloomberg Brief, and this is Bloomberg.
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg Television?
That's a great question.
Very good question.
Good question. Great question. I so appreciate that question. You certainly ask interesting questions.
Bloomberg Television. Top experts, great questions.
Tariffs, I think, are probably the first time in my career I've had to deal with like a fundamental change in government policy in terms of how we think about how markets work.
The challenge, especially within my supply chain, is now how do you have enough productivity initiatives to offset the increased cost of all the products?
Can you just move your supply chain out of China and into the US or out of Mexico and up to Canada? Is it that easy?
It's not that easy, but we do have flexibility. And we had been, prior to tariffs, prior to any of this, we had been on a journey to diversify our footprint out of China. So probably 2-ish years ago, roughly 65% of our toy and game volume was coming from China. Today, as we entered into 2025, that was around 50%. All we've done is really accelerate the path to get down to roughly, call it 30% by the time we enter into 2027. For us, I mean, if tariffs stay, if tariffs go, it's never good to have so much of your manufacturing base centered on one geography. We think diversification is good, but it does take a bit of time to get vendors and suppliers up to speed. Quality is a big deal, especially when you're dealing with toys and kids. It's not an instantaneous thing, but it's not also a 5-year, have to build a new plant from scratch.
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romain Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
At a time when policy in Washington is driving Wall Street, we draw a distinction between the rhetoric and the action, bringing you market-moving guests and original reporting. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
It's 5 a.m. in New York City. Good morning. I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Here's what you need to know. The Fed on notice. Chair Powell vows to stand firm, saying the central bank has been served with DOJ subpoenas. Mulling options. President Trump considers potential courses of action for Iran, where nationwide protests entered a third week. All of that as equity futures drop, the dollar drops, and gold and silver hit records. So let's take a look at those markets, because the S&P 500 did close out Friday at a record. Hey, why change a good thing, right? Futures, though, pointed lower. Obviously, markets rattled by this Fed independence question, which is coming back to haunt them now. You can see NASDAQ futures taking the brunt of it. Russell 2000 futures down as well. But there's obviously a lot of data to price in as well. We got the non-farm payrolls report Friday. CPI coming tomorrow, though that could have some residual data issues according to Bloomberg Economics. The VIX, though, is elevated. We're talking 16.5 at this point, so not crazy, but definitely some de-risking going on. Let's take a look at bonds, because the long end of the curve is definitely steepening by 5 basis points now. We're still only at 486.21, but as you can see here at the 2-year yield, we're at 352.60, so there is some steepening going on. And then in terms of precious metals, we're seeing gold at a record, and then we also have silver on track for its 4th double-digit monthly gain. It's already up 17% month to date. Crude also pricing in maybe a tiny bit more the potential for regime change or some sort of shift in relations with Iran. All right, a lot to get through today. We got bank earnings starting tomorrow. Let's get to some individual movers first, though. Chloe Melly is in London. Chloe.
Good morning, Bonnie. The shares of credit card firms and banks are in the red this morning after Trump called for a 1-year cap on interest rates at 10% and said that if companies do not comply, they would be in violation of the law. And so we are seeing some of that reflected in some weakness for the likes of JP Morgan and Capital One. Moving on to Walmart, which is on the up this morning after announcing a partnership with Alphabet for AI-enhanced shopping on the Gemini platform. And this is being welcomed quite warmly by the market. And finally, miners are also on the move today. As you mentioned, we have got gold hitting new records because of that rush to safe havens, copper hitting new records because of supply concerns, and all of that is being reflected in some positive share movements for the likes of Newmont and Barrick this morning.
All right, a lot to keep an eye on today. Chloe, thank you so much. That's Chloe Melly there for us. And coming up this hour, we're going to look at the Fed rate path and any potential market risks with Terry Wiseman of Macquarie. First, though, the Federal Reserve gets hit by subpoenas by the U.S. Department of Justice.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation.
President Trump getting pushback and from both parties, while Bloomberg learns that the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte was a driving force behind the decision. Joining us now is Bloomberg international and policy correspondent Michael McKee. So Michael, a lot to take in, but this idea of criminal misconduct is new, right? There were complaints before, but this is a DOJ bunch of subpoenas. What can Powell do to fight this? What tools does he have at his disposal?
Well, basically, he's going to comply with the subpoenas, and then he's going to use public relations, the markets, to fight back on this. I mean, this is extraordinary. We've never seen anything quite like this in central banking. Ordinarily, when there's some sort of crisis with the Fed, Fed officials back off and basically go quiet and try to stay out of the line of fire. In this case, Jay Powell deliberately deciding to get in the middle of it all. It is extraordinary that we are seeing a Fed chair essentially accuse the President of the United States of extortion. This all started when the U.S. Attorney for District of Columbia, Gene Pirro, began an investigation in November, supposedly, into any Powell criminal activities after being referred by Bill Pulte. She's now sent out subpoenas requesting documents related to the Fed renovations. We don't know exactly what they don't know because the Fed's been very upfront about all of this. But Trump, of course, has been stymied in his efforts to fire Jay Powell, and that anger on his part may play into this. And we've got that Supreme Court hearing relating to Trump's efforts to fire Governor Cook on January 21st. Now, the president, Bonnie, has denied overnight, saying he doesn't know anything about it, but he's certainly not very good at the Fed, referring to Jay Powell, and he's not very good at building buildings. Remember, the president went over to the Fed to check out this building. Biggest question is, how does this all play into some kind of new Fed chair getting appointed by the president, which is supposed to happen any day now? Tom Tillis, who is a senior Republican on the banking committee, which would have to vet anybody, said last night, if there were any remaining doubt about whether advisors within the Trump administration are actively pushing to end the independence of the Federal Reserve, there should now be none. It is now the independence and credibility of the Department of Justice that are in question. So Tillis, a Republican coming out on Powell's side, makes it sound like it's going to be difficult for the president to nominate anybody who would be particularly seen as a loyal servant to the Trump administration.
Well, Tillis said that he wasn't going to support confirmation of any nominee for Fed chair until this matter is, quote, fully resolved. How do you fully resolve a matter like this unless the DOJ has new evidence, or, I mean, is there anything the president can do to tell the Department of Justice to back off, or are we then getting into very gray areas again?
Oh, well, you'd be getting to gray areas, but the president has driven past all the gray areas so far. He's told the Department of Justice, in essence, to try to indict other people like James Comey and Letitia James. So he could tell them to back off. They could announce that there was nothing found and the grand jury was not asked to indict or refused to indict, as they have done in the cases of Comey and James. So there are off-ramps, but it's going to be very difficult for the president now, especially somebody who would be seen as a loyalist to the president getting nominated. He's going to have a very hard time selling the markets on their independence.
Exactly, and you're definitely seeing a market reaction today, although it doesn't look, and we don't know yet, it's hours before the US Open, but it certainly doesn't so far look like a Liberation Day trade, at least.
No, it looks more like the taco trade, that the markets are reacting negatively because they don't want the president messing with the Federal Reserve and its setting of interest rates, but they're thinking he's going to back down at some point. We'll have to see how things open when we get to the cash open.
Yeah, just a few hours away. Michael, thank you so much. That is Bloomberg's Michael McKee. And do tune in to our interview with Bill Pulte, Director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. That's at 7:30 a.m. New York time, 12:30 p.m. in London. Turning to Iran now, fatalities mounting from protests across the nation stretching into a third week. President Trump says the U.S. is looking at potential options in response to reports of deadly crackdowns.
We're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options. We'll make a determination.
Joining us now for more is Bloomberg's Middle East breaking news editor, Patrick Sykes. Patrick, we know that internet was down in Iran. What do we know that's coming out of there? What do we know for sure?
Yeah, the latest casualty count we have from activists is about 500 people dead, with another 500 reports of fatalities that they're investigating. So unfortunately, over the weekend, in the context of that internet blackout, it does look like there's been a sharp increase in the number of people being killed. Today, Iranian officials, the regime is holding kind of counter demonstrations throughout Iran in various cities. It's also claimed, the foreign minister has claimed that security forces are now in total control. I think the test of that will be this evening, as we've seen that most of the protests have centered on the evening over the past few days. And then the other part that's emerged the past couple of hours is Iran's indicated that there's contacts going on with the US. The foreign ministry spokesperson said that lines of communication are open with the US envoy Steve Witkoff, and that messages are being exchanged when needed. So there is a diplomatic channel. Whether or not it's active, how active it's being at the moment remains to be seen, but we're getting indications that there are contacts going on there as well.
Patrick, how much of a threat are these protests to the regime?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a crisis for the regime. Unfortunately, it's the kind of crisis that they've
大家好，经过的2天，我差不多把这台掌机大概稍微摸了一下，大概知道包括它系统啊、界面怎么操作，还有怎么调整什么的。那差不多大概有87%的了解。那现在我在做的事情就是，它这个原厂附128G 的 SD 卡，其实游戏是大杂烩啊，配的乱七八糟，就是反正 Game Boy 啊，任天堂系的也有，然后大型电玩也有，然后沙腾、DC， 甚至 PSP， 然后最好笑是连 PS2 都给啊。但这颗可是32566哎，它怎么跑得动啊？最好。然后呢，我个人就是比较有一些偏执啊，哎呀，因为这一台既然是仿沙腾和 Mega Drive 的造型的，然后官方又称它格斗机，那我的掌机也不缺也不是只有这一台，那我何必要3个系列？那干脆单纯一点，因为我过去已经拥有太多这种10字键加 ABS-Y 的掌机，那时候最大遗憾就是我需要一台6个键配置，比例配置完全符合沙腾和 Mega Drive 的掌机，现在有了，那当然就是让这台掌机作为 Mega Drive 和沙腾为主的掌机啦。好，简单说，我把大部分游戏都删光了，先把备份到电脑，然后只留下精简后剩下沙腾 Dreamcast 这个 Sega 系的，还有这个沙腾和也就是跟 Sega 有关的相容的主机版，像 Naomi 啊，或是Atomic Web 的这个街机平台，这样子，然后比较单纯一点。然后我也 给它配了一些部分游戏，把它的名称给它换成我们台湾就是繁中比较习惯的用语，这样子。那给大家看一下，这个 Rich Arc 的话，就是基本上你资料夹有放游戏，它才会出现这个游戏平台的名称在上面。所以大家可以看到，已经没有任天堂相关的，剩下都是大型机版了，从开始翻 Burn 这个网站整理。那 Game Gear 我觉得也是可以啊，就是，然后 Genesis 这是原本资料夹就有的，就是好像就是欧美那边的MD 的称呼，不好意思，我今天还有点多啊。然后 Master System 也有 Mega Drive。啊，这个是在 QQ 聊天室有一些高手，有一个大佬，一个高手帮我们汇整的，他也帮我们把，虽然是简体，但是他把大部分好玩的游戏都帮你整理好，名称也编排过，加上它的这个封面，对，都比原厂的优秀很多。这个我建议大家可以自行下载，我这边就不提供了，因为这东西 ROM 是有版权的，那你要下载就去找对岸，他们反正这个连结很好取得，在这个影片中不多赘述。看，它也把名称前面加上游戏类别，然后空一格，就是主机名称，然后右边一个很精美的这个。游戏外盒的这个图案。好的，那再来我来演示一下这个 Saturn 方面 Saturn 的游戏吧。对，这边我放了一些我个人比较偏好的游戏，就是我童年，算童年吧。我初中的时候，那时候我因为班上考第1名吧，帮我妈买的，那时候叫做4时代游戏机。然后我们那时候不知道店员老板推荐我们 Saturn 不是推荐 PS1， 但其实 PS 其实那时候是比较夯的。那不管了，那时候也买了，我接触游戏不多，像《吞食天地》、《洛克人8》、《洛克人3 A4》、《越南大战》，其实我玩游戏就这么少而已，甚至连VR 化都没有了。好，那我这边也其实我已经试玩过了，我可以告诉大家说。至少我常玩游戏里面有6成、6、7成都跑得蛮顺的。那我现在就来演示一下。首先，恶灵古堡，这个是已经有这个大陆的网友高手把它中文化，所以看得懂剧情。来，看到没有？就是恶灵古堡1代，沙腾上少有的恶灵古堡游戏。虽然沙腾3D 经验不好，但不过在那个时代，其实 PS 和沙腾的性能表现都差不多啦，都是格子用的。它这个模拟器有时候很奇怪，它没办法在里面调音量。像这一款在调到最大声就这么大声而已，很奇怪。可是别的游戏又很大声哦，这个我在想应该是模拟器本身的问题吧。好。这边利用模拟器的快捷功能，我昨天玩了一个进度，我把它读出来。好，可以看到，沙腾其实应该是模拟器，其实我相信模拟器优化更好的话，应该是可以跑得更顺的。看，它有游戏很卡，有游戏又很顺哦。不过因为沙腾本来就不好模拟，只能期待作者未来可以继续发功，把它优化更好。维斯卡，这些都是实质的演算出来，不是预录的。其实蛮顺的，有没有觉得？各位， 目前没有过来，其实昨天已经有这里。对，看来3566这个 RK RG RX 已经通过第一个3D 游戏沙等3D 游戏的考验了。好，我们最后跳过去。下一款是《赤壁之战》。虽然这个大型电玩的模拟已经是我还是很好奇。这个当初这个游戏也是让我陪伴我蛮长时间。我们来看模拟器跑得如何吧。理论上是没问题，因为它是2D 游戏，只要模拟器没有出太大问题，理论上可以模拟的蛮顺的。对。读取也蛮快的，至少比在原生主机还快啊！以前还要插记忆卡、加速卡。这个骑在马上的话，很容易可以把敌人砍倒。只要不是遇到 BOSS 级的，你只要就是按你的第一键一直冲刺，就可以把大家撞翻了。可以把人砍过来，这个在当年尺度算很大的。
Scene. It's terrible. No one should buy it. Because that's how YouTubing works, right? You get free stuff from vendors, and then you say it's amazing because that's what you're in it for. You're in it for free stuff. You're in it for free stuff. That's what you're in it for. Oh, free batteries. Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely pay the bills with that. Hey, Fabio. Fabio, instead of money this month for editing my videos, I'm going to be giving you some lava batteries. No, you don't want those. Oh, okay. Just thought I would do a little one-man play about how people think YouTube reviews work. You get free shit that you don't really want. Sometimes it's terrible. You do a lot of work making a review of the stuff. You post the review. You try to hopefully be useful, helpful, and then people accuse you of shilling. The circle goes round and round. No, some people always do. Am I a streamer yet, Mom? Am I a streamer? Kind of like that. Yeah. Well, that's a good look for me. I'm like a druid. The FPV druid. Yeah. Okay. Assassin's Creed. I'm a Robin Hood of FPV. I had a person reach out to me and say, I want you to make a video. We want to make a video. And we want a video about, so one of our competitors makes a product. They made that product for a long time. They didn't innovate. We made a product that competes with them. And as soon as we released that product, they updated their product. And the undertone of this was, and our product deserves more recognition because we innovated, and now because their first product was already super popular, their updated version of the product is beating our product, even though our product deserves the acclaim because we were the ones who prompted the update. You follow me? I'm trying not to name names so it gets a little confusing. And they said, I wonder if you want to make a video about how innovation happens and stagnation happens in the world of FPV, and how it's bad for the FPV community and for the individual hobbyists when one company becomes so dominant that they stagnate and there's no one, and that the little upstart innovators who do things different, maybe they don't have the most popular products, but they deserve recognition for even if all they do is kick the big guys in the butt and make them move. And I was like, that's an interesting, and he said, we even might have some marketing budget, for this video. So the implication was, you make a video telling everybody how great we are and how we deserve recognition for the things we do, and kind of like not kind of like subtly maybe a little bit shitting on the competition for not being more innovative. We'll pay you a little bit of money. And I said, first of all, I'm just not super interested in making that video. That could be an interesting video to make. I'm just not in the mood to make that video right now. But even if I was in the mood to make that video, the fact that you brought it to me and you kind of wrote it for me, and then you offered to pay me to put words in my mouth, at that point, it's basically I'm just doing an ad read for you, except instead of me saying, vendor A is good, they paid me to say they're good, and then cashing my paycheck, I'm kind of doing like a sneaky ad read without like, oh, look at this documentary about FPV and innovation. And just by coincidence, I'm going to say that vendor A is good and vendor B was stagnating and didn't innovate. And I was like, so I'm not going to do that. I was like, nah, not interested. And if you're curious about how like bias happens in YouTube. Like obviously sometimes people just get paid to say things, like, but oftentimes that's not happening at the level that FPV is at. If you're like Jake Paul, and I'm just throwing a name out, I'm not specifically accusing Jake Paul of anything. I mean, if I were to accuse him of something, he probably would have done it because he seems like a pretty skeezy person. But that's just my opinion. That's not legally slander or whatever, libel, defamation. But like if Jake Paul does an ad for like a crypto coin, which I think he did, or an NFT app, well, he's probably just getting paid to say it and trying to cash out. But that's when people are much bigger than the world of FPV. Like even if you get up to the people with 2 to 10 million subs, like the Potato Jets of the world, the people doing videos about DJI and Sony cameras, like there could be some money there. I'm not saying there is, but they're like, but in the world of FPV, you know, when like Flywoo or Beta FPV has a new drone, I don't know, they don't offer to pay me. Maybe they just think I'll say no because I'm so scrupulous. I don't know. I'm gonna guess they're not just like paying cash for reviews. And just getting free product is nice because you do get content. I definitely remember when I was so happy to get content and not have to pay for it. I mean, get product and not have to pay for it because it meant I had anything to make content about. So like the smallest, I guess what I'm getting at is the smallest YouTubers in a few thousand viewers to let's say 10 to 20,000 viewers or less, somewhere around that. Those guys are so hungry for content and don't have any money usually, unless they're independently wealthy. They maybe would be in a position where they would like take product and want to say nice things about the product. And then at the higher end, you're making so much, once you get past a certain point, you're making enough money from your channel, you kind of don't give a shit about the free product. Like either you're just getting offered whatever product you want and all you have to do is ask for it and say you'll do a review. And then if they're like, well, we want to see that, you're like, no, F you. And then if they don't give it to you, you just buy it. Because like if you make $2,000, $3,000 a month in ad revenue, you could probably afford to spend $500 on a drone or something. I don't know. So just been thinking about bias in the YouTube space lately. You don't have a feed from OBS. Because I didn't start the virtual camera plenty. Sorry about that, bud. Sorry. You should be good now. Anyway. Q! You guys putting in the chat everyone you think is a shill. No, don't do that. I don't like being called a shill. I'm sure nobody else does. You can people think I'm a shill. You could think somebody else is a shill. Keep it to yourself. Watch their content. Don't watch their content. There's no point in going in the YouTube chat and saying somebody is or isn't a shill. Anyway. I don't think there are many YouTubers that give their honest opinions, says Kilo Foxtrot. What are they giving then? What do you think they're doing? I mean, I do think they're giving their honest opinions. I just think some of them don't have very interesting insights. I think when, and I'm not going to name names because I'm not trying to pick fights, but I think when Joe YouTuber gets up and says, this is the best drone ever. I almost did an accent there just because when I do a character, I do an accent. And then the accent that would have come out would have made it seem like I was pointing the finger at somebody. I'm glad I saved that. I think that when Joe YouTuber gets up and says, this is the best drone, I really like it, I think he's probably being sincere, he just isn't very insightful. I think he means it. You know? Anyway. Yeah, I think that when they don't give any negatives, it's just because they're bad at their job. But not because they are bought off. I just think they grab the product and they're like, I love it. I freaking love it. And then they just, they don't really, they're not, you know, anyway. Yeah, I admit it. I almost did a kind of bad Australian accent because that's my go-to accent. And I just want to explicitly say I in no way was intending to point a finger at any Australian or New Zealand people. That's just the accent that comes out of my mouth when I just roll the dice and pick a random accent. So, anyway, I love everybody. Watch what you want to watch. Don't watch what you don't want to watch. And get on with your life. Alrighty. Let's do some questions. Ricardo Benders asks, why can I only pay monthly on Patreon? I'd rather pay yearly. Can you make that available? No. I decided not to make that available. I don't remember why. When you turn on yearly subscriptions, there is a thing that happens, and once you turn on yearly subscriptions on Patreon, you cannot turn them off. You have to leave them on forever. And I remember when yearly subscriptions first came out, they said, hey, do you want to turn on yearly subscriptions? And I was like, maybe. Oh, no. There was something about them that made me say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't remember what it was, but no, I decided a long time ago not to turn those on. And I don't remember why. Annual memberships creator overview. Subscription billing, renew, promotions. How do I manage annual members, reviewing annual members? I don't remember. What if I change my tiers or content? I don't remember. I don't remember what it was. But there was a reason why I didn't want to do it. So be it. What are the main things to pay attention to when trying to get the cleanest analog feed? This is a tricky one. A good analog feed is a whole bunch of small things adding up. When you see somebody like this and his analog feed looks amazing all the time, you're like, how does he do it? He's done a lot of little things right for a long time, to the point where they're all second nature. So start with, I think the first place to start, I think a good video transmitter is not the first place to start. Obviously, it's on the list. I think the first place to start is a good quality antenna on the drone. Now, that doesn't have to mean an expensive antenna. Some of the little whip antennas are good quality, but a good quality antenna on the drone. A good receiver in the goggles. So for me, a good receiver would be something like the TBS Fusion is one of the best. The HD0 receiver is very, very good. A bad receiver in the goggles will give you bad range, although you can get surprisingly good signal out of some cheap goggles. I've heard people say that they've got the EV800D goggles, the old $100 Eachine goggles that everybody's first FPV goggle, and with a good set of antennas, they get really good coverage compared to some more expensive goggles. So good quality antennas. On the goggles, I suppose the goggles should be first, and then the drone. It doesn't have to mean a high gain antenna. The nice thing about the goggles is you can spend $40 or $60 on a good antenna for the goggles, and it applies to all the drones that you fly, including drones that aren't yours. You can be spectating. Or you could get, you have to put a good quality antenna on all your drones. Good antenna, goggles, good antenna on the drone. Good receiver module, like TBS Fusion is my go-to these days. Immersion RC Rapid Fire, just as good, more expensive. SpeedyBee goggle module, supposedly pretty good, but I'm not sure. I haven't tested it. And Skyview module, decent, but not as good as Fusion, not as good as HD0 goggles. And then, so then we've got the video transmitter, which in my humble opinion is less important. Like, I know a good, clean video transmitter. At the end of the day, the video transmitter isn't doing very much complicated. It's just broadcasting the signal. I don't, like, you can get a video transmitter that puts out more power, but the idea that, like, some video transmitters put out a cleaner signal than others, they're all using the same hardware to a large degree. The power amplifier, it may be a little bit of custom design depending on the VTX, but I think most video transmitters, which are mostly concerned about is the output power, and as long as it's outputting the power it says it is, I think you're basically, you know, some of them might, like the frequency might shift a little bit, but those are probably pretty bad, and I'm willing to bet that most of them are about as good as any others. You could spend a little extra money on a good quality video transmitter if you just want to be sure, but a video transmitter that's putting out the power it says it's putting out, and more power obviously is better most of the time. And then your location relative to the drone is key. I've seen people flying, they're flying around a bando, and they're like, how does he have good range? And I'm like, he found the one place to stand where he has coverage everywhere he needs to be. So you will learn as you fly more and more to intuitively understand that if I stand here and I point my antenna that way, then I can fly here, but not there. But if I move over here, now I can see, and you sort of get this, you know, I can see the matrix understanding of how RF signal propagates through a place. All right. So those are the main things. What did I miss, chat? What did I miss? Anything I missed? I think those are the main things. Raising your altitudes, being higher up. Standing versus sitting or kneeling, big difference.
Somebody in chat asked, is there any difference, and you may mention this, but is there any difference between powering via your FC or
yeah,
where to power, doesn't matter where you put the ground, and then also like, you know, piping through the FC to get LSD, can that introduce issues?
Well, you kind of have to do that because you want OSD. The power source can matter in how clean the video feed is. If you're picking up electrical interference from inside the drone, then that will make your feed dirtier, noisier, whatever. You can learn to distinguish between breakup that's caused in the air and breakup that's caused in the drone. The cleanest power to the video transmitter is going to depend. On some drones, you'll get cleaner video by running off of battery voltage because you bypass the voltage regulator on the flight controller, and therefore you're saying, just give me the raw voltage, and the video transmitter has enough filtering to handle it. Whereas on some builds, you will get better video by running off a voltage regulator on the flight controller because the voltage regulator steps down the battery voltage and acts as a filter. I'd say that more of the time, you'll get cleaner video running off a voltage regulator than running off of VBAT, but it depends on the drone. Having a good capacitor on your build, if you don't have a capacitor, on everything from a 3-inch up and up, you want a separate capacitor. For a 5-inch drone, something like 1,000 microfarads, so 470 to 1,000 microfarads, 35 to 50 volts, depending on how big of a capacitor you can fit in the build. For 3-inch, something like a 220 to 470, again, depending on what you can fit in the build. And then take the voltage. If you've got like a 3S and you're going up to 12 volts, you want maybe a 17-volt capacitor, just get a little headroom, 17 to 25 roughly. You don't need to go more than double the voltage. So if your battery voltage is 12 volts, you wouldn't need to go higher than a 25-volt capacitor, but you can go like a little bit lower. If you're a 4S, that's going to be probably a 25 to 36-volt capacitor for about 17, 18 volts, something like that, 17 volts. So capacitor, and then clean power to the to the video transmitter. But what is going to give you the cleanest power will depend on the build of your flight controller. I would start by running it off a regulator, but if I didn't get clean video that way, I would try moving it to battery voltage. Sometimes that will be better. All right. We got a super chat here from Uzei. Thank you for $5, Uzei. I traded my first child for the DJI Goggles 3, and now my wife left me. How do I bind the G3 with my O4 Pro? You should figure out how to bind your wife and your child back to yourself. I assume the question's a joke. You press the bind button on one, you press the bind button on the other. They'll bind. Any recommendations? Skydar FPD, thank you for a $5 super chat. What are your recommendations for the best high-quality Rolex-style alternatives or replicas? Oh, I see. This is a watch-related question. Well, it is a super chat, so I guess I have to. So right now, the Thorn TO23 is an excellent vintage Rolex homage. The Thorn TO23, an excellent, it's like clearly an homage, really good build quality, very nice looking. It is a vintage. I think it's based more off of the 5-number Rolex serials. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think it's old enough to be the 4-number Rolex serials, or the 5s. Not the serials, the model numbers, the references. Yeah. So you got, where's the brown? The brown is like the really nice one in my humble opinion. The brown looks really nice. There you go. That's very nice. Textured brown dial, gray bezel. Very, very nice. Quality. $200. PT5000 movement. The only gotcha with the PT5000 movement is sometimes the PT5000 movement self-destructs if you use the crown to wind it. Now, there are people who say that's not as common as all that. They're like, no, it's a very good movement. It's very easy to regulate accurately. And you get a few outliers that make a big stink, and mostly it's fine. So there are people who say that if you have the PT5000 movement, you should avoid winding the crown as much as possible and just shake it to move the rotor to get it spinning. So if you're looking for a Chinese homage, there you go. Obviously, there's a million like Swiss watches out there that are in the style of a Rolex. I'm guessing that's not what you're asking for. And then if you're looking for a rep, which I don't recommend because that's illegal. First thing I would have you do is go to Reptime on Reddit and lurk for a couple weeks and learn how not to make mistakes, because it's a wild world out there and you will waste your money buying something and not get what you meant to get. But if you're looking for a rep, the black ceramic Rolex from VSF is like one of the best reps you can buy today. Like seriously one of the best reps you can buy today. There it is with the date window, and there's one without the date window. Hang on, that's RCF. See, that's not the one you want. You want VSF. That's RCF. See how it says RCF? That's RC factory. You want, that's QF. That's Q factory. You don't, I mean, those are probably fine, but we want VSF. VS factory is the best. There we go. Black ceramic VSF. That's the one. That's the one to get these days. It's going to take you 3 months before they even have it in hand because VSF is so backed up. There's a non-date version too if you want it. I'm not finding it, but it's in the list. Q factories. There's all these different factories that make the watches. RC factory and VSF. That's the one. This is supposedly one of the best reps made today. So a beautiful, beautiful rep. If you're a horrible person who would spend your money on a counterfeit product, which is illegal and unethical, and no one should do it. But the black ceramic VSF Submariner is very, very good. All right, thank you for your super chat. Definitely do not just go to that website and spend money. See, you didn't know about the 3 different factories, did you? You didn't know the difference between a QF, a VSF, and an RCF, right? Which is the best? You don't know. You got to go to Reptime, and you got to spend some time lurking and learn learn about, the different reps and who to buy from. And definitely do not just go do a web search, because you will get some page that takes your money and sends you a $20 shitter. Okay, you have to go through the reputable dealers. Okay. Anyway, you should do this though, because this is an homage, but it's not an actual ripoff. All right, thank you for your super chat. I know a thing or two about rep watches. Thank you for 120 Norwegian kroner. I have a QAVR 13 Pro 12S using 6S 4500 milliamp hour lipos. I want to go long range with it, carrying the Red 5 Raptor. QAVRR 13 Pro 12S. What the hell is it? RR QAV Pro 13 12S. It's a Cinelifter, I see. Ah, this guy. Okay. It reminds like, okay. What batteries should I go for? Oof. You're running 4500 12S now, right? So you need 12S. I mean, you would go for a bigger 12S. I'm hesitant to just like name a battery, because I don't, this is not like a quadcopter that I have a lot of experience with. So like, what size battery will mount on it, right? What's going to be the right choice there? If you're currently using a 4500, I'll tell you one thing you can probably do. There's a simple way to approximately double the flight time of almost any drone. And that is, you buy an Upgrade Energy Gold battery. Now, these are Amprius silicone anode cells. If you don't know what silicone anode is, go look up on YouTube or something, silicone anode lithium batteries. It's basically a new chemistry of lithium battery that approximately triples the energy density. So if it triples the energy density, why does it only double the flight time? Well, because not everything is perfect. And mostly you triple the energy density, you double the battery weight, you end up roughly with double the flight. I don't know. That's my experience flying them, is you roughly double your flight time. Now there is a limitation, which is, first of all, that is a green, that's not a gold. So here is a gold 6S 11.1 amp hour. Okay? So that is almost triple the amp hours of what you're currently running. So you're going to buy 2 of these. You're going to wire them up in a 12S configuration. You're going to spend $1,500 because these cells are expensive as shit. And you're going to roughly double your flight time. Bada bing, bada boom. But you have to be careful, because these batteries have a very low discharge current. Now, the good news is that the C rating is very low, but the milliamp hours is very high. So you get a decent discharge current, but like 30 amps. This is what this is rated for. Now, I'll bet your drone is pulling more than 30 amps. Oops, this isn't going to work for you. You could go 12S 2P, and now you spent $3,000 on the batteries, and you've got 60 amps of discharge. So, like, but for people with more money than sense, here's a 6S 3P. 6S 3P, 33 amp hours, $2,300. So that's going to get you 90 amps of discharge current, right? Yes. So there you go. Spend $2,300 on a 6S 3P. You're going to go from 45 milliamp hours to 33 milliamp hours. You think you'll get a longer flight time? Yes, you will. A lot longer. And the beauty is, what does that weigh? Oh, you're going to need 2 of them. I'm sorry, you need 2 of them because you're running 12S. So $5,000. You need a lot longer flight time, though. Surely they've got a 6S 2P. There we go. There you go. 6S 2P. Perfect. $2,400, 22 amp hours. That's the one to get. But only 60 amps. Can you get under 60 amps? We'll see. Like, probably what you would really do is just double the size of your battery by adding more parallel. So instead of 12S 1P, you would do 12S 2P. You would have 4 6S 4500 batteries, wire up a Y adapter to put them in parallel, and see, like, what that does. The reality is that an octo, a coaxial octo is not ideal for longer range and endurance. It's more ideal for power in a small footprint. You're at 13-inch props. If you were to adjust that build so it was running 15 or 16 or 18-inch props, you would significantly increase your flight time. You might not even need to change your motors. Just do a motor output limit to effectively reduce the motor RPM. And you would get significantly longer flight time, as long as you don't smoke a motor because you're running too big of a prop. So, like, I've seen people with a 13-inch build, they just put longer arms on it because the arms are just carbon tubing. They just bought some carbon tubing and they cut it to length in their shop. And they took a 13-inch build up to an 18-inch build, same motors. The motors were a little oversized to begin with, so then they went to 18-inch props and the motors were okay still. Just reduce the motor output limit to bring the RPM down a little bit and double the batteries, and then they double or triple their flight time. Okay. All right. Cool. I have an old Lumineer QAVS JV OG edition. I can't seem to source the top frame mount, and I can't redraw and cut it for all-in. And I can redraw and cut it on our CNC machine. Yeah, do it. So first of all, I just showed you guys a website where you can buy counterfeit Rolex watches. So, like, if I were to then go, no, don't scan and cut my precious carbon fiber plate from my QAVS frame. No, I don't really have a leg to stand on there, do I? But also, no one makes that part. You literally cannot buy. I don't think you can buy that part. The QAVS V1 is out of production. So, like, at that point, just do what you got to do. That's an interesting idea. Rav FPV says go to 15-inch props and run 8S instead of 12S. That way your motor KV stays about the same. That's clever. That's clever. Of course, he's already got a bunch of 6S batteries, so maybe he should go to 20-inch props and run 6S. Aha! No. Hey, I'm a beginner. Hi, Easoil. Help, please. Yeah, that's what beginners usually say to me. I ordered DJI FPV-3 remote. Not sure what's next. I want a Tiny Whoop digital. Is the O4 Air unit compatible with my remote? Hey, Easoil, why did you buy it if you didn't know what it would be compatible with? I'm not trying to, like, make you feel dumb, but I want you to, okay, I want you to feel just a tiny bit dumb right now. Just a little bit. Don't, like, beat yourself. Don't, like, go, cry in the shower and kick yourself all night because but just feel you're going to waste so much money in this hobby if you just buy things randomly without knowing whether they're compatible. I'm trying to help you not waste your money. Now, maybe there's more to the story about why you bought it. And the story makes sense. In that case, don't feel dumb at all. But yes, the RC3 is compatible with the O4 Air unit. So you're going to want a micro drone like the Flywoo 1.8 with the DJI O4 Lite. Let's just go to Flywoo's website. Firefly 1.6. Oh, is it the 1.6? Oh, I like the 2.0 better. I like the 2.0 better anyway. Fine. DJI Vista? No. Okay. How about 04 Lite? S Nano Baby Walk Snail Avatar. Come on. Why is the search failing me so badly? Why am I failing so badly? Microdrone. Yeah, like not the Fly Times 85. HD0, Walk Snail, DJI Vista, Walk Snail, HD0. Hello? What kind of world is it where I can't buy a drone with the DJI in it? It's not even showing up as existing. Tiny drone? There you go. Firefly 1.8, Nano Baby 04 wide. That's a solid one. And then like go there and there. The Flylens 85. That's the one I'm looking for. What are you talking about? The Flylens doesn't exist. Yes, it does. There we go. Flylens 85, brushless whoop, HD. The Flylens 85, you could get the 04 Pro. It flies okay with the 04 Pro. It flies better with the 04 Lite. 8503, 85 HD0, 8503, 04 Pro, 04 Wide. There we go. This is probably the one I would actually recommend to you if I was guessing which one you would like the best. The Flylens 85 HD 04 wide. It's got the light air unit on it. So, hello. What the flip? So, come on. I cannot handle. It's got the light air unit on it, so it flies really nicely. It's got the wide angle lens, so it has good field of view. I feel like that is a money drone right there. If you want to spend a little more money and have a little heavier drone with a little better image quality, go for the 04 Pro. And then if you want something that's a little smaller and open prop, so it's going to be a little bit more acrobatic, but the props are going to, you're going to have a little bit harder time if you crash. You can break props, right? Then the Firefly 1.8. Those would all be good choices.
So he said tiny loop. What if he wants to fly inside? Do you think there's a reasonable to go to the 75 there, or maybe even a 65 with the 04 Lite? How do you feel about that?
I don't like the 65 millimeter drones with the 04 Lite. Even I think that's it'll fly, but I just think it's not ideal. That's okay. I would probably take a 75 with the 04 Lite for indoors. And if you really want a smaller one, the 65 is acceptable. So, what's a good happy model?
Flylens 75. Right.
Yeah, there's a Flylens 75. Totally. For indoor flying, consider the Flylens 75 with the 04 Lite.
Oh, sorry, real quick. One note, you should just know when you're shopping for these drones, you need to be picking the PNP version of the drone.
Good point.
You don't have the console rest, you have the DJI controller, and the PNP will give you connection to the DJI radio.
Yeah, that is correct. You need the PNP receiver. That is the DJI radio version. The Flylens 75 with the 04 Pro, skip it. Too heavy, in my humble opinion. Not every people will disagree. I respect their disagreement. I would say skip it. Flylens 75, 04 wide. It's just a little smaller than the 85. Can have a little less power, be a little more appropriate for indoors. Then we've also got things like, so I don't think Happy Model makes a 65 millimeter version. Do they make a 75 millimeter version? HD0, Mobula 704. There we go. That's the one. Do you like my search results? Do you see how my search results aren't polluted with AI garbage and sponsored bullshit? I'm just getting actual content about what I want. That's because I switched to Kagi. Thank you to whoever donated me a 3-month Kagi subscription. I love it. I will be keeping it as a service. It's what search used to be and should have stayed forever. Mobula 704. There you go. So here's the, now the reason I like the Flywoo better is that the Flywoo has the wide angle adapter, and that significantly improves the field of view on the 04 Lite. I think that's just a winner. However, if you want to consider other options, the Mobula 704 is on. But honestly, I would get the Fly lens. It's just better. I think it's just better. So, anyway. Is it safe and useful to make your own 2S batteries out of 1S batteries? If you're going to solder the cells together, then maybe. Although it's going to be a lot of time and labor, and they're not that fucking expensive. Pardon my language. They just buy them. But okay, if you've got a bunch of 1S, the thing is, if you're not soldering the cells together, if you're just using an adapter, you're adding a lot of resistance. So you've got a series adapter, plug, plug, plug. That adds a lot of resistance, and those little 1S batteries, the connectors, the PH connectors especially, they have a lot of resistance, and so it just kills your performance. You get a ton of sag. If you just have a ton of 1S batteries and you want to make 2S's out of them, definitely solder them up. Don't just use an adapter. But realistically, is it safe? I don't know. Are you going to screw it up? Maybe, right? It's as safe as you are good at making batteries. Is it useful? If you have a lot of time and no money and a lot of 1S cells that you want to turn into 2S cells, I guess you could do it. The 04 is video transmission, but does it have a built-in for remote as well? Yes, it does, Izoli. To go back to your question, it does. It receives to the RC3. I saw some people asking about my vest, my hoodie, whatever. It is a shirt. It is a separate shirt and a vest / hoodie that pulls over. Oh yeah. I mean, come on. It'd be better with a long sleeve shirt, I think, because what are you doing wearing short sleeves with a hood? Unless you're just incredibly stylish, which I am. Oh, that's not a good sign. Look, already we're starting to pull some threads. That's brand new. Literally, this is like the second time I've worn it. It got caught in the zipper, I think. Oh, hopefully that won't happen again. Yeah. All right, well, so begins the downfall. Oh, when I was flying my Cinewhoop, the tiny metal wires got pulled out of the camera plug. Is there a way to reconnect the...
离未来世界又更进一步了。日本开发出一种颠覆想象的机械地板，让人在虚拟实境里一直走下去。它会及时追踪人的脚步、身体重心，甚至在用户还没踏出下一步前，就已经预测到要往哪里走，永远不会走到边界。离未来世界。
这就是为什么你应该和正确的人结婚，因为当这对老夫妻看到雨水正在顺坡而下时，他们的第一想法竟然不是避雨，而是回家拿来一个浴衣板放进水中，并站上去模仿起了冲浪。而当路过的车辆对他们鸣笛致意时，他们甚至还用一个超酷的回旋回应了车主。这就是为什么你应该和正确的人结婚，因为当这对老夫妻看到雨水。
당연히 할머니들 어르신들 좋아하겠다고 생각해요.
그쵸.
근데 일단은 우리 그 시장을 한번 가봅시다. 다른 시장.
2011年 ，Epic 的主业还是做引擎，旗下最出名的 IP 还是虚幻竞技场和战争机器。克里夫·布莱森斯基尚未离职，一副摇滚明星范儿的他，还是 Epic 的当红炸子鸡。这一年，波兰工作室 People Can Fly 与 Epic 合作推出了一款 FPS 游戏《子弹风暴》。无论放当时还是现在，它的设计理念都是打枪游戏中的异类。别的 FPS 游戏中，你的目标都是以最快的速度用手中的武器消灭敌人，而《子弹风暴》里则鼓励你发挥想象力，用手中的无敌闪电鞭和大力金刚腿以及周围环境花式击杀你的敌人，从而获得更高的评价。游玩的过程中，我脑中都不禁会想起一支经典歌曲。
少林功夫好耶，太棒了啊！少林功夫够劲，呱呱呀！我是金刚腿，金刚腿，他是铁头功。哇哦哇哦哇哦！我是你的头。
子弹风暴从内容到宣发都充满了恶搞的味道，相当欢乐，获得的评价也不低，怎奈叫好不叫座，销量感人。不过这款游戏还是值得一提的，因为10年过去，似乎也找不到玩法与之类似的 FPS。今儿我们就详细聊聊子弹风暴。近期很多人听说 People Can Fly 这个名字，应该还是通过先驱者这个打枪刷装备游戏，而这个波兰小作坊作品质量最高的时候，其实是10多年前，2004年推出的第一款作品《恐惧杀手》，依靠爽快与技巧兼备的 FPS 体验，在当时所获评价颇高，多人部分甚至一度成为 CPL 电竞项目。一炮而红的 People Can Fly 随后与 THQ 合作，准备开发一个叫 Come Midnight 的新项目。结果开发1年半后 ，THQ 取消了这款作品，并且拒绝支付剩下的30万刀报酬。虽然波兰的用工成本较低，但 People Can Fly 剩下的资金也只够运作1个月了。Epic 的副总 Mark Rain 对 People Can Fly 的能力和作品印象深刻，直接拍板向他们注资，还把将战争机器移植到 PC 上的差事交给他们办。这把算是拯救了破产边缘的公司。2007年6月。People Can Fly 的创始人 Adrian Camillas 正打算做一个新 IP。Epic 副总 Mark Rain 希望 PCF 的下一款作品也用虚幻引擎。看过游戏的美术概念图后颇为欣赏，说要不咱们一起做这款游戏吧。于是 People Can Fly 成立以来制作阵容最强大的游戏就这么上马了。Adrian 亲自当总监，因战争机器的成功而广为人知的克里夫 B 担任游戏设计，死亡空间的编剧 Rick Remender 负责撰写剧本。在 Epic 的牵线搭桥下，由 EA 负责本作的发行。子弹风暴的开发周期长达3年半，游戏一开始是一款类似战争机器的掩体射击游戏，多次迭代后才变成了一款第一人称射击，同时还从别的游戏中吸收了不少要素，比如洛克人中的滑铲，真人快打中天蝎的毁灭公爵里的用脚踹人。在内部试玩时，他们发现大家都会像在玩弄猎物的猫一样玩弄敌人，于是干脆加入了一个技巧射击系统，用以奖励玩家的创造性。击杀方式越花式，得分越高。克里夫 B 称其为火爆狂飙的打枪版。这么一说，倒也确实有点像。火爆狂飙系列不同于当时市面上其他赛车游戏的主要卖点，就在于你的驾驶和破坏行为能获取分数，甚至还有专门的搞破坏模式。可惜这个系列被 EA 雪藏了。扯远了，我们继续聊聊子弹风暴。EA 给本作定下的宣传策略就是展现游戏的不正经与幽默。在之前的视频里我还提到过，子弹风暴发售前还出了个名叫 Duty Calls 的免费小游戏，从字体到名字都明摆着在恶搞 COD。标题画面的下方还特地说明本作与动视无关。这个小游戏流程5分钟不到，但全程都在玩梗。开场就在恶搞辐射系列和 MGS4 的台词。
War never changes. Or does it? The war has changed. Did it? The answer is no. Unless it is yes.
后面就是在讽刺 COD 的剧情演出和流程的俗套。
Hey, Fox Club Niner. I'm gonna point at you and say something serious to further develop the game's storyline. Oh, my dead. Increasing the drama of the story.
Ha ha ha. You cannot stop me unless the game goes into slow motion for some reason, and I become easy to shoot. Oh no.
在关底 BOSS 投降后，直接播出子弹风暴的宣传片，说明游戏打破陈规，不落俗套。待到游戏在2月22日上市，倒也确实感受到这是一款与众不同的游戏。剧情方面很有80、90年代恶搞流 B 级片的感觉。虽然克里夫 B 说他们的灵感来源有萤火虫以及冲出宁静号，但游戏本身的风格互逼得多。主角 Grayson Hunt 是个整天沉溺于酒精的太空海盗，哪怕在审问追杀他的赏金猎人时，也不忘来两瓶。他还有个身份是前邦联 Dead Echo 小队的队长，专为 Serrano 将军干脏活。这个小队一直以为刺杀目标都是十恶不赦的坏蛋，但在一次行动中 ，Gray 发现坏蛋竟是我自己。Serrano 将军其实只是利用他们滥杀无辜，清除异己。在刺杀现场与满口脏话的 Serrano 将军通话质问，然后当场叛变。这个转变有点微快呀，连队友都在吐槽。
What the fuck? That was a giant group decision you just made for us.
不过按照剧情整体的调性，这也没啥。从飞船舱门故障的提示都不忘恶搞一下 X360 的三红来看，不按常理出牌的故事走向也算是意料之中。在边缘星系当了多年海盗之后 ，Grayson 误打误撞碰上了 Serrano 的旗舰尤利西斯号，这么好的机会，必须去干死 Serrano 将军啊！ Grayson 的飞船坠毁到了 Stygia 星，尤利西斯号也遭到重创，一同坠毁。不过这似乎是一个被废弃多年的殖民地，残存的本地居民都是一帮蛮族，在坠落中幸存的队友基本被凶恶的当地人杀害，最后只剩下了依靠机械植入物才勉强存活的佐藤实景。不过佐藤还需要随时与脑中植入的邪恶 AI 争夺控制权。这里似乎原本是一颗旅游观光星球，但出于某些原因，居民们被迫紧急撤离，未能离开的人组成了相互攻击的帮派，还有些倒霉蛋游客成了变种人。接下来的目标很简单，将军这样的大人物肯定会有人来救，他就是我们离开这鬼地方的船票。而要找到将军，还得靠他手下 Final Echo 小队的指挥官 Trishka 帮忙。这个不靠谱的三人组得靠合作才能逃出升天，顺便去干死将军。对了，如果你玩过质量效应的话，应该会觉得 Trishka 的声音挺耳熟的，因为和学姐用的是同一个配音演员 Jennifer Hale， 不同的是这游戏里台词的脏话比较多。
Yeah, go fuck yourself. You shit clouds give chase, I will kill your dicks.
不过这么多年过去，我对这个游戏的记忆跟剧情没多大关系，互逼的战斗才是精华所在。游戏在飞船坠毁后的第一个关卡就教会了你使用子弹风暴中最关键的2个招式：踹人后能让敌人进入时间减缓状态的大力金刚腿，和能把敌人拽过来进入类似状态的无敌闪电鞭。这样玩家就有足够的反应时间决定如何击杀这位悬空的敌人。你可以像传统 FPS 那样击杀之，但这样你只能获得10个积分，爆头也不过25分而已。但哪怕你只是把敌人踹下悬崖，获得的评价都比直接击杀要来得高，而且也不知道是不是故意为之。初始突击步枪算是游戏里最不好用的武器，不仅准心乱晃，而且伤害感人，大概是为了逼迫玩家使用自己的武功绝学。另外，游戏里很多花式击杀的达成都与关卡的环境密切相关，比如把敌人踹到金属尖锐物上的叫巫毒娃娃，丢仙人掌上的叫穿刺，碰到电线上的叫 shocker， 姑且可以翻译为麻了。使用后方油桶的爆炸摧毁敌人的直升机叫防空炮，把人踹进水中的击杀方式叫鱼食，把敌人踹进食人花里叫喂饲料。而不同的武器还会增添更多的击杀招式，比如左轮手枪的特殊射击是射个窜天猴出去，倘若直接命中敌人，则能把它带上天化为烟火，朝着被破防的精英怪菊花射击。这种击杀方式叫 Fire in the Hole。子弹风暴里的武器种类繁多，比如有半锁炸弹发射器，能把敌人击飞的4管霰弹枪，能控制子弹方向的狙击枪，爆炸球发射器，还有能把人钉墙上的钻头发射器。根据环境和所使用武器的不同，这游戏里的各种杀招加起来足有145种，这里我就不一一介绍了。你可能会问，获得的积分高有什么用？问得好，这直接关系到你的生存。按照子弹风暴中的设定，Serrano 将军接了个清除该星球上暴民与变种生物的任务。一开始他还派出了地面部队，但是物资有限，只有具备高超杀戮技巧的士兵才有资格获得补给。你所获得的评价分数，
我觉得比较不太习惯放姜，
但是因为姜它就是有海鲜，我还是 怕海鲜的味道太重，就是一般台湾会海鲜跟姜放在一起，是为了把那个鱼腥味去掉，所以才会放姜。但是我也不知道韩国人是用什么去掉鱼腥味。
那我先水煮蛋，
对，
因为你们家也有那个餐厅嘛，在建议餐厅嘛，通常是韩国客人来，也比较有年纪的会吃吗？
他们会吃，但是我们会 focus 在不要放太多口味，就不要重口味的话，他们应该会可以接受。
OK。
对。
可是你有跟爸爸讲你回来吗？你3个月都没有来韩国。
你说我跟爸爸说我回来了吗？
对。
我还没跟他说，对。
你就马上来这边？
对啊，你们很着急的感觉，所以马上来这里。对。
Oh my god。
对啊，所以我们要好好做。
对。
没关系，我妈妈也不知道我来韩国，现在我还在工作。
我爸爸好像昨天才知道我来。
真的假的？
我也没有讲。喂，怎么来了？喂，你怎么来台湾？喂，
真的吗？
不是说写完再煮蛋吗？不是啊，你这个要挑叶子啊。
哦，是。
你有看过有人这样子连那个根一起吃的吗？
对哦。对叶子要
只要剥叶子下来
，OK 没问题。
然后这个也要削皮，芋头要削皮，但是你要小心，因为它就是会黏黏的，你手可能会痒痒。
削皮，
削皮，然后姜也要削皮。
对。
然后这个你也没洗到啊。
OK。
削皮，动作快点。
好。
今天你不是我的老板，今天你是我的助手，二厨，知道吗？
好。Yes sir。Yes sir. 진짜 반응이 이상이 안 가.
반응?
진짜 그 할머니들 반응.
왜냐면 나이 드신 분들 그 간을 세게 안 드시니까 짜지만 않으면 괜찮을 거야.
역시 전문가.
我也算是介绍美食的人，但是我也没有吃过那道菜。
我也是。
是哦。
有一些热炒店可能会有，但你可能都没有点。大家都常常点什么，炸虾什么
客家小炒，
虾仁，那叫什么？凤梨虾球。
凤梨虾球，对。所以这道菜是你去热炒店一定会点的。
也没有啊。对我来说是还蛮家常的菜，就是在家里吃到的味道。
我做到不到一半。
我们应该 OK。
它要切成完全小块吗？
对，小小的，
完全跟这个一样，蒜头。
不用到蒜头，但是一片一片的，然后硬硬的地方让它变小小的。
OK。
有人要帮我洗鱼头吗？然后鱼头里面的那个内脏脏脏的，就是都挖一挖这样。
哇，这边好酷。哇，好香。
然后真的很香，
果然韩国人就是喜欢吃五花肉。
我想品尝一下，好不好吃？不是为了吃饱。
只是为了试味道。
对啊，试味道。
一定要，等下味道部分就要麻烦你。
对啊，因为它真的是美食家。
我是美食家，可以相信的。
用这杯要放几次才是1800呢
？6次，因为这里标示说300，所以我放6次。我忘了放几次。
重新来。
我忘了，我真的忘了。哎呀。
我不跟你讲话。
不要问我。
我有了。
哇，黑白大厨。
真的黑白大厨哎。哇，我第一次看这种东西。
蛋酥。
这样做的话，会不一样吗？
就是很香，它如果加进去那个里面，加进去火锅里面的话，会很香。
我有认识这